The moment you started watching this video was not an accident, it was not random, and it was not just another message appearing in your feed, because there is a reason heaven allowed you to hear these words right now, and the message is powerful, urgent, and deeply personal for someone who has been silently suffering, someone who has been misunderstood, someone whose heart has been wounded by betrayal, lies, and hidden attacks that others thought would never come to light, because today the message is this: God is saying a public exposure is coming, and what has been hidden in darkness will not remain hidden forever. What has been whispered behind closed doors will soon be revealed in the open, and the very people who thought they could manipulate the truth will suddenly find themselves unable to hide when the light of heaven begins to shine on everything they tried to bury. You see, there are seasons in life when the chosen ones of God walk through confusion and injustice, seasons when people lie about them, twist their words, question their intentions, and even celebrate when they believe they have successfully damaged their reputation, and during those seasons it often feels like heaven is silent, it feels like God is watching but not intervening. It feels like the truth is being suffocated while lies are being celebrated, and that silence can be painful. Because the heart of the chosen one begins to ask questions like, God, why are you allowing this? And why do the people who hurt me seem to be winning? But what many people do not realize is that heaven often allows silence for a season, not because God is absent, but because God is preparing a moment of undeniable exposure that will be so clear, so powerful, and so public that no one will be able to deny what truly happened. There are individuals who believed they were clever when they spoke against you in secret. They believed their private conversations would remain private forever. They believed their manipulations would never be discovered, and they were comfortable attacking you while smiling in front of others. But they forgot one very important truth: nothing escapes the eyes of God, nothing is hidden from heaven. And nothing done in darkness can remain hidden when the appointed time of exposure arrives. Because God is not a God who ignores injustice forever, He is a God who observes every detail, every conversation, every intention of the heart, and when the right moment arrives He begins to reveal things in ways no human could orchestrate. For a long time you may have felt like defending yourself, you may have wanted to explain your side of the story, you may have wanted to confront those who misrepresented you, but somehow something inside you held you back, something inside you kept saying, stay quiet, something inside you kept urging patience even when your emotions wanted immediate justice, and now you are beginning to understand why that restraint was necessary. Because when God Himself decides to expose something, the revelation carries a weight that no human defense could ever match, and the truth becomes undeniable because it is not being spoken by the wounded person but revealed by circumstances that heaven arranges. The people who tried to damage your name believed that time would erase the truth. They believed that if they repeated their version of the story long enough it would become the accepted reality, and for a while it may have looked like their plan was working. People may have believed their lies, people may have looked at you differently, and the loneliness of that experience may have wounded you deeply. But what they did not understand is that time is not their ally when God is involved. Because time often becomes the very tool God uses to prepare a powerful reversal, and the same timeline they thought would protect their secrets becomes the timeline that leads to their exposure. God sees the moments when you cried in silence. He saw the nights when you questioned your worth because of the words people spoke against you. He saw the moments when you wondered if the truth would ever come out, and he also saw the strength it took for you to continue moving forward without retaliating, without launching your own attacks, and without becoming the very kind of person who hurt you. And that quiet strength did not go unnoticed in heaven, because the heart that refuses to repay evil with evil is the heart God often chooses to defend publicly. And now something is shifting, something in the spiritual atmosphere is changing, because there is a divine timing to exposure, and that timing is approaching for someone listening to this message right now. And when it begins, it will not happen through drama that you create, it will not happen because you forced it, and it will not happen because you spent your energy trying to prove others wrong. It will happen because the truth will begin to reveal itself naturally through circumstances that cannot be controlled, conversations that unexpectedly surface, and actions that expose the real intentions of those who once hid behind carefully crafted appearances. The people who thought they were safe will begin to feel uncomfortable because secrets have a strange way of creating pressure inside the person who carries them, and when the light of truth begins to approach, that pressure increases until eventually something breaks, and when that moment comes, the mask falls, the story changes, contradictions appear, and people who once believed the false narrative begin to notice that something does not add up. And suddenly the same voices that once supported the lies start asking questions that the liars cannot answer. God does not rush exposure because divine justice is not impulsive, it is precise, it is strategic, and it is timed in a way that produces maximum clarity, because if the truth had been revealed too early, some people would have dismissed it, but when God chooses the moment, the evidence aligns, the witnesses appear, and the circumstances speak louder than words. And the result is something that cannot easily be ignored or denied. For the person who has been wrongly accused, misunderstood, or quietly attacked, this message is a reminder that your silence was not weakness, your patience was not foolishness, and your restraint was not defeat. It was preparation for a moment when heaven itself would step forward and begin to reveal what you were never meant to expose alone. And when that moment arrives, the same people who once doubted you may begin to look at you with new understanding, not because you demanded their belief, but because the truth became too obvious to ignore. And when the exposure begins, it will not only reveal the actions of those who tried to harm you, it will also reveal your character, your endurance, and the integrity you maintained even when the situation tempted you to abandon it, and that revelation will speak louder than words, and the result is something that cannot easily be ignored or denied. For the person who has been wrongly accused, misunderstood, or quietly attacked, this message is a reminder that your silence was not weakness, your patience was not foolishness, and your restraint was not defeat. It was preparation for a moment when heaven itself would step forward and begin to reveal what you were never meant to expose alone. And when that moment arrives, the same people who once doubted you may begin to look at you with new understanding, not because you demanded their belief, but because the truth became too obvious to ignore. And when the exposure begins, it will not only reveal the actions of those who tried to harm you, it will also reveal your character, your endurance, and the integrity you maintained even when the situation tempted you to abandon it, and that revelation will speak louder than any defense you could have offered, because people will realize that while others were busy creating narratives, you were busy surviving the storm with dignity and faith. There are moments when heaven decides that enough is enough, moments when the silence ends and the unveiling begins, and if you have been feeling a strange sense of anticipation lately, a feeling that something is about to shift even though you cannot explain it. That feeling may be connected to the timing of this exposure. Because when God prepares to reveal something, the spiritual atmosphere often begins to change before the physical events appear, and those who are spiritually sensitive start noticing that change. The same people who laughed when they believed you were isolated may soon become very quiet. The same individuals who confidently repeated false stories may suddenly avoid the conversation altogether, and the reason for that shift is simple. When truth approaches, lies lose their confidence, because lies require darkness to survive while truth grows stronger in the light. And here is the part many people do not expect, because exposure is not only about correcting the past, it is also about preparing the future, because once the truth becomes visible, the path in front of you begins to open in ways that were previously blocked by misunderstanding, and opportunities that once stayed distant begin to move closer because the cloud of confusion surrounding your name starts to clear. God does not expose darkness merely to embarrass people, He exposes it to restore order, to protect the innocent, and to ensure that the narrative surrounding a chosen person is not permanently written by those who tried to harm them, and when that restoration begins, it often brings a sense of peace that the wounded heart has been longing for. If you have been carrying pain because of hidden betrayal, if you have been waiting for the truth to surface, and if you have been wondering whether justice would ever arrive, this message is a reminder that heaven has not forgotten, heaven has not ignored what happened, and heaven has not abandoned you in the middle of the story, because the God who sees in secret is also the God who reveals in public. And when the appointed moment comes, the exposure will not be partial, it will be clear, undeniable, and powerful enough to change the way people understand the entire situation. So do not lose hope in the quiet season, do not assume that silence means defeat, and do not believe the illusion that those who harmed you have escaped accountability, because the story is still unfolding, the timing of heaven is still moving forward, and the moment of public exposure that God has prepared is closer than many people realize. The truth about exposure is that it never arrives the way people expect it. Because when God decides to reveal something that has been hidden, the process often unfolds in a way that feels almost supernatural, and the people who once felt completely secure in their secrecy suddenly begin to realize that the very things they thought were buried are slowly rising to the surface, piece by piece, moment by moment, until the full picture becomes impossible to hide. For a long time those individuals may have walked confidently, believing that their version of events would remain the only version people ever heard, and they convinced themselves that you were too quiet, too patient, or too isolated to challenge what they had said, but what they did not understand was that your silence was never the end of the story, it was only the calm before a divine revelation that would change everything. There are seasons when God allows people to think they have succeeded in their schemes, because exposure without preparation can sometimes create confusion instead of clarity, and heaven is not interested in confusion. Heaven is interested in truth that stands firm, truth that cannot be twisted, and truth that arrives at the exact moment when people are finally able to see it for what it is. That is why you may have walked through a long period where nothing seemed to change, where the same misunderstandings continued, and where the same people kept repeating the same false narrative, but even during that time God was quietly arranging circumstances that would one day bring everything into the light. Sometimes exposure begins with something very small, something that seems almost insignificant at first. Maybe a conversation that someone overhears, maybe a message that surfaces unexpectedly, may be a contradiction that someone notices while listening to a story that has been repeated too many times. At first people may dismiss it, but small cracks have a powerful way of growing when truth is involved, because once a single crack appears in a lie, the pressure of reality begins to widen that crack until eventually the entire structure collapses. This is why those who build their reputations on deception often become nervous when the smallest detail begins to shift, because they know that lies require constant protection while truth protects itself. You may not even realize when the exposure begins, because it often starts quietly behind the scenes before it ever becomes visible to the public eye. Conversations begin to happen that you are not aware of, questions start being asked that you never hear, and the people who once believed the negative narrative about you begin to reconsider what they were told. They start remembering things that did not quite make sense before, they begin noticing inconsistencies that were once ignored, and slowly the perception surrounding you begins to change even before anyone openly admits that the truth is different from what they once believed. During this time the people who tried to harm you may begin to feel something they did not expect: pressure. The weight of hidden actions becomes heavier when the light of truth starts approaching, and many individuals cannot carry that weight forever. Some will try to distance themselves from the lies they once supported. Others will attempt to rewrite their story to make themselves appear less responsible, and some will simply become quiet because they realize that the moment of accountability is getting closer. This shift can be confusing to watch because the same people who once spoke loudly may suddenly lose their confidence, but that change is often one of the first visible signs that exposure is unfolding. God has a unique way of revealing intentions as well as actions, because sometimes the deeper truth is not only what someone did but why they did it. The motivations behind betrayal often become visible over time, and when people begin to see those motivations clearly they start understanding the situation in a completely different way. What once looked like a misunderstanding suddenly looks like manipulation. What once seemed like a harmless rumor suddenly reveals itself as a calculated attempt to damage someone's reputation, and the individuals who once appeared trustworthy begin to look very different when their true intentions are exposed. For the person who has been wrongly accused or misunderstood, this period can feel both strange and emotional because you may begin noticing subtle changes in how people treat you. Individuals who once kept their distance may start approaching you with a different tone. People who were once skeptical may start listening more carefully, and the environment around you may slowly shift from suspicion to curiosity. These changes might not happen overnight, but they often begin gradually as the truth works its way through conversations, relationships, and situations that you may never directly witness. It is important during this season to remain grounded and calm because exposure is not a moment for revenge, it is a moment for restoration. When God reveals the truth about what happened, the goal is not to turn you into the same kind of person who hurt you. The goal is to restore balance and allow the truth to speak for itself. Many chosen individuals make the mistake of thinking exposure is their opportunity to celebrate the downfall of others, but divine justice is not about celebration of failure. It is about the restoration of truth and the protection of those who were wrongly treated. As the exposure grows clearer, the story surrounding your name begins to change in ways that may surprise you. People who once believed the worst may start recognizing the strength it took for you to remain silent during the storm. They begin to see that while others were busy spreading rumors, you were busy surviving a difficult season with patience and dignity. That realization can be powerful because it reveals a level of character that cannot be faked, and character revealed under pressure often earns a respect that ordinary circumstances never create. The individuals who once tried to harm you may attempt to repair their image once they sense that the truth is coming out. Some may try to act as if they were never involved, others may try to present themselves as misunderstood participants, and some may even attempt to reconnect with you in order to protect themselves from the consequences of their actions. These moments can be emotionally complicated because the same people who once ignored your pain may suddenly seek your understanding, but it is important to remember that forgiveness and wisdom must walk together. God often allows exposure to reveal not only who hurt you but also who truly stood by you during the difficult season. When the truth becomes visible, you may notice that the people who remain supportive, patient, and respectful during the confusion are the same individuals who continue to stand beside you when everything becomes clear. Those relationships often become stronger because they were tested during a time when believing in you required faith rather than convenience. Another powerful aspect of exposure is that it can create opportunities that were once blocked by misunderstanding. When your name begins to clear and the truth about your character becomes visible, doors that were once closed may begin to open again. People who once hesitated to trust you may suddenly feel confident in offering opportunities, collaborations, or friendships that were previously withheld because of the false narrative that surrounded your situation. You may also experience a deep emotional release during this season because carrying the weight of hidden injustice can quietly exhaust the human heart. When the truth finally begins to emerge, it often brings a sense of relief that words cannot fully describe. It is not simply the relief of being proven right, it is the relief of knowing that the truth did not disappear, that your patience was not wasted, and that the integrity you protected during the storm has finally been seen. There is also a spiritual lesson in this process because exposure reminds everyone involved that actions always carry consequences, even when those consequences take time to appear. The individuals who tried to harm you may have believed that their actions were small, harmless, or easily forgotten, but the unfolding truth shows that nothing escapes the awareness of heaven. Every word spoken in secret, every plan formed in hidden conversations, and every intention carried in the heart eventually meets the light of accountability. As this revelation continues to unfold, you may notice that your own perspective on the situation begins to change as well. The pain that once felt overwhelming may gradually transform into wisdom, and the experience that once seemed like a painful setback may reveal itself as a preparation for a stronger future. Many chosen individuals later realized that the season of misunderstanding forced them to develop resilience, patience, and spiritual depth that they might never have discovered if life had remained comfortable. God often uses exposure not only to correct a situation but to elevate the person who endured it. When your name is cleared and the truth about your character becomes visible, people begin to see you in a different light. They see someone who endured pressure without collapsing, someone who resisted the temptation to retaliate, and someone who trusted that truth would eventually find its way into the open. That kind of strength leaves an impression that cannot easily be forgotten. And so the message remains the same: a public exposure is coming. The things that were whispered behind closed doors will not remain hidden forever, the lies that once seemed powerful will eventually lose their influence, and the truth that waited patiently in the background will step forward with a clarity that changes the entire story. When that moment arrives, the world around you may finally understand what heaven has known all along, that your silence was not weakness, your patience was not defeat, and the truth about who you are was never truly in danger of disappearing. There is a powerful moment that comes when the truth has finally traveled far enough that it can no longer be contained, and that moment is the turning point in every story where injustice once seemed to dominate the narrative. The people who once believed they had full control over the story begin to realize that something has shifted beyond their influence, because the truth has a momentum of its own. It moves quietly at first, then steadily, and eventually with such clarity that no effort to hide it can stop its progress. This is the stage where the exposure that God has been preparing begins to reach the public space, and when that happens, the same voices that once supported the lie begin to fall silent because the evidence of truth becomes too strong to ignore. For the person who endured the storm, this moment may feel surreal. There may be a sense of disbelief that what you prayed for, what you hoped for, and what you waited for is finally unfolding in front of your eyes. You may hear people repeating the truth that you once wished they would understand, and those words might echo in your mind with a strange mixture of relief and reflection. But what makes this moment truly powerful is not simply the exposure of what others did, it is the confirmation that God never lost sight of your story even during the darkest chapters. The individuals who once spoke against you may suddenly find themselves facing questions they never expected. People may ask them to explain the contradictions in their story, to clarify the statements they once made, or to account for actions that no longer appear innocent. Some will attempt to defend themselves, some will withdraw from the conversation entirely, and some may even admit the truth when they realize there is no longer a way to hide it. Each response becomes part of the larger exposure, revealing not only the actions but the character behind those actions. What makes divine exposure so different from ordinary conflict is that it does not rely on your effort to prove anything. You did not need to chase people with explanations or force anyone to believe you. The truth arrived through the unfolding of circumstances that no one person could control. And because of that, the clarity of the situation carries a weight that human arguments rarely achieve. People begin to see the story in its full form, not through the distorted lens of rumor but through the undeniable pattern of events that now stand in the open. There may also come a moment when people approach you with apologies or expressions of regret. Some may admit that they believe things about you that were never true. Others may say they wish they had listened more carefully before forming their opinions. Hearing those words can stir many emotions inside your heart. On one hand, there may be relief that the truth is finally recognized. On the other hand, there may still be the memory of the pain that those misunderstandings caused. In that moment you are given a powerful opportunity, not only to witness justice but to demonstrate the strength of your character through grace. Forgiveness does not erase what happened, but it frees your heart from carrying the burden of bitterness. When God exposes the truth, He also invites you into a higher level of peace. The situation that once felt like a wound begins to transform into a testimony. The experience that once made you question your future becomes a story of endurance and faith. And the people who once doubted you may begin to see that your response to the exposure reveals even more about your character than the exposure itself. Another powerful result of this moment is the restoration of your voice. During the season of misunderstanding, you may have felt as though your words carried little weight. You may have wondered if anyone truly saw the real person behind the rumors. But when exposure arrives, your voice begins to carry a different kind of authority. People listen with new attention because they realize that your integrity was proven through time rather than through argument. Your story becomes an example that reminds others not to judge too quickly and not to believe every whisper they hear. The exposure also creates a natural separation between truth and deception. People who value honesty begin to draw closer to you because they recognize the strength you showed during the difficult season. At the same time, those who built their influence on false narratives often drift away because the environment of truth no longer supports their behavior. This separation is not something you need to force, it happens naturally as the light of truth becomes stronger. As your name begins to clear and the full story becomes known, you may notice doors opening that once seemed permanently closed. Opportunities that were once withheld because of doubt may suddenly appear. People who once hesitated to trust you may now approach you with respect and confidence. These new paths are not simply rewards for surviving a hard season, they are signs that God is positioning you for a future that could not have been reached while the misunderstanding remained unresolved. At the same time, it is important to remember that exposure is not the final chapter of your story. It is the transition into a new one. The past may have included betrayal, confusion, and silence, but the future now holds clarity, growth, and purpose. What you learned during the difficult season becomes wisdom that guides your next steps. The patience you practice becomes strength that helps you face new challenges with confidence. There will be moments when you look back at the entire journey and realize that even the painful chapters carried hidden lessons. You may see how the season of silence forced you to rely on God more deeply than ever before. You may notice how the experience sharpened your ability to discern the intentions of others. And you may recognize that the resilience you developed during that time prepared you for responsibilities and opportunities that require a strong and steady heart. When people hear your story after the exposure, they may feel inspired by the way you handled the situation. They may see that you chose patience when retaliation would have been easier. They may see that you trusted truth even when the evidence of that truth was not yet visible. And through your experience, they may begin to understand that integrity is not proven in comfortable seasons but in moments when everything seems uncertain. The final stage of exposure is often the restoration of peace. The tension that once surrounded your name begins to fade, and the constant awareness of being misunderstood gradually disappears. Life begins to feel lighter because the burden of hidden injustice is no longer yours to carry. The truth has spoken, the story has been corrected, and the future now stands open in front of you. And so the message that began this journey reaches its fulfillment. God said a public exposure is coming, and that exposure is not simply about revealing the actions of others. It is about revealing your strength, your endurance, and your unwavering commitment to truth even when it was difficult to stand alone. The same God who saw what happened in secret has now allowed the truth to stand in the open, and the clarity of that moment becomes a powerful reminder that justice delayed is not justice denied. As you move forward, carry this lesson with you: the truth never disappears simply because it is hidden for a season. It waits patiently for the moment when it can be seen clearly by everyone who once doubted it. And when that moment arrives, it does more than correct the past. It opens the door to a future where your story is no longer defined by the lies spoken about you but by the strength you showed while those lies were being spoken. So stand with confidence as this new chapter begins. The silence that once surrounded your story has been replaced by clarity. The shadows that once hid the truth have been replaced by light. And the God who watched every moment of your journey has now allowed the world to see what heaven already knew: that the truth about you was never meant to stay hidden forever.